So, a slight change of plans today. I don't really have my usual camera with me, so you can kind of see that the picture it's a little bit blurrier, and you can see more than you should. Like this area over here. I am not going to tell you what this is. You'll have to figure it out for yourself. Maybe, just maybe, it's where I keep my cocaine. But let's get started, shall we? So, you know how efficient and smart and wrinkly brain I made the Arabs out to be, and how attractive, beautiful, and sexy they are with those glistening, sweaty six-packs? Yeah, throw that right out the fucking window. They're dumb as hell. And, like assholes, they ghost you after one intense night together. Now, last time that we talked, the Umayyad Empire had invaded Iberia, conquered the region, and made it into their empire's westernmost province. All the while the Visigoths faded away and became the kingdom of Asturias up in the mountains to the north, and they were resisting any further Muslim invasion attempts. And that's where we are in the story. However, things are about to heat up for the Umayyads. Back home in Damascus, their capital, a rebellion is starting to boil over. But before we continue, I just want to tell you something. This video and the previous one is essentially just a timeline. I'm going to mention a lot of events during this and also individuals, but I'm not going to go too deep into them for now. I'm making a sort of a timeline of the Reconquista with this event, and considering the 800 years of history, I might just need to make a second video. And after we make the timeline, I'm going to talk about different topics that I mentioned at the beginning of the previous video. It'll be in the description somewhere, or just go to my channel, whatever. Now, the Umayyads have not been doing a good job at ruling their empire. They're discriminating against non-Arabs and generally being bullies towards everyone who didn't follow their exact rules. So, the Abbasids start saying, hey, those guys kinda suck, so do you wanna help us get a seat on their chair? We promise to leave you alone forever and let you do your thing. So of course, the Abbasids stage an uprising, which quickly leads to a revolt, and then a short civil war between royalists to the Umayyad Caliphate and the rebels. The Umayyads lose this war, and they get evicted and exiled from Damascus. The Abbasids, when they become the new emperors, they move quickly to secure their power, tracking down the majority of the old imperial family and executing them. At one time, they openly declared that they would give out amnesty to any member of the old family who went to Damascus and asked for it. So 80 family members went back to Damascus, and 80 family members were promptly killed and executed. But there was one prince, one Umayyad prince, who survived the slaughter. Prince Al-Rahman I, who over the course of 5 years made his way westwards with his remaining supporters. He had the destination in mind, Iberia. He made contact with royalist and disaffected factions in the region. He landed in Iberia, specifically here in Torux, modern-day Spain, where he quickly gathered local support from the populace who came to see the prince who was thought to be amongst the many dead. And in a moment which probably resembled Tariq's moment some decades prior, the prince assembled an army and marched on Cordoba, defeated the governor, and he was declared the Emir and ruler of Al-Andalus. This moment fundamentally shifts the politics of Iberia, as the country was plagued by ineffective governors who repeatedly failed to consolidate their control over the peninsula. Al-Rahman was an effective and no doubt brilliant ruler, as he established effective control over much of the peninsula despite the complete chaos around the country, such as rebellions that the Abbasids foment, Catholic populations which were tired of Arab rule and would rebel and take over entire towns, and the aforementioned Asturians who marched as far south as Porto at this time. And even the defeated governor was reported to make several bids to regain control over the peninsula. However, once this prince's rule was secure, he made a call throughout the entire Muslim world, declaring Iberia as a safe haven for whichever members of his family remained. And many people did answer, such as the prince's own son, named Suleiman, the prince's son, or a man named Al-Mayak, who would go on to become one of the emir's top generals. But things were not going to stay great for much longer. Having seen their rebellions fail, and in fact the prince's position becoming increasingly secure, the Abbasid Caliph, a man called Al-Mansur, sent an army to invade. This battle was a sight to behold. The Caliph sent the governor of Africa at the head of this army, and they reportedly landed near modern-day Beja, and the whole area immediately flipped to the Abbasids. And Al-Rahman, when he went to meet the Abbasid army, was completely outnumbered for the battle. Honestly, having researched like this whole topic, I kind of want an HBO show set in the Reconquista. Like there's a lot of really dramatic shit that happens. The Emir made his way to the redoubt of Carmona, where the Abbasid army found him and laid siege for 2 months, gradually starving out Al-Rahman's army. This situation changed in a damn near legendary moment, where the prince handpicked 700 fighters and they all sallied out of the castle, catching the Abbasids by complete surprise and routing their entire army. The Abbasid governor was caught, killed, decapitated, and had his head sent back to the Caliph, who then called this exiled prince the Hawk of Quraysh. I have no idea if I said that properly. The Caliphs seemed to both hate the Umayyad prince and respect him, as he also commented upon receiving the decapitated head, "God be praised for putting the sea between us." Now, like a lot of the situation with these medieval stories is that they're almost definitely inflated, but that's what people said happened in the battle. And well, regardless of what really happened, the Umayyad prince won the battle. Yeah. But with this battle that he won, the Reconquista it sort of became a truly Iberian affair. And from this point on, very few outside empires would engage directly in battles in this conflict. There are some, and I'm going to mention one, but it's very few, and they don't really stay in this conflict for very long. However, the new emir's rule, despite being secured from the new dynasty in the east, was never truly safe from internal threats. And of course, the ever-encroaching Christian kingdoms to the north. And this I think is the next true phase of the conflict. It's when the Reconquista becomes less a story of opportunistic kings who barely feel like kings, taking advantage of weak and ineffective governors, to a tale of several kings fighting between each other on a much bigger scale, despite the fact that the big empire which conquered the place is now gone. So let's get back to the story. The exiled prince had secured his realm from the Abbasids, but he was still threatened by internal rebellions and the kingdoms to the north. So, obviously, after his position in the capital was insecure, he took an army north and started battling the Christians and independent Muslim rulers. And by 778, he was approaching the Ebro Valley, uncomfortably close to the Catholic kingdoms and deep inside aforementioned independent Muslim territory. So, increasingly desperate, they sent a call to their nearby empire, the Frankish Empire, led by none other than Charlemagne. And they're like, yo, we got some Muslims uncomfortably close to us. You want to help us beat them up? And Charles is like, oh, hell yeah. Let me just get my infidel club and infidel clubbing boots, and I'll be right over. But, says Charlie, probably making these Muslim rulers really nervous, you gotta swear fealty to me if you want my help. And these rulers agree, and Frankish troops begin pouring over the mountains. So, a big part of the next story takes place here, in Zaragoza. Charlemagne, the Frankish emperor, arrives with his behemoth of an army, and he demands to be let in. However, his ally in the town refuses him, claiming that he never promised his allegiance to the emperor, and in return, Charles lays siege to the town. The siege was short, however, as for reasons unknown. After about a month, the emperor takes his army back home to France, with some hostages taken from the town. However, as they cross the Pyrenees Mountains, they are ambushed. This engagement is now known as the Battle of Roncevaux Pass. I don't really know, it's something pass, whatever. As a contingent of the Frankish army is ambushed by a bunch of Basque soldiers. This attack happened mostly out of vengeance, as the Franks, when they entered Iberia, had attacked and destroyed the city of Pamplona, which was the capital of the Basques in the area. One of the hostages that the Franks had taken with them was a Muslim by the name of Suleiman. He was one of the men who had sent his petition asking for Frankish aid, in fact. And during this Basque ambush, Suleiman managed to escape, and he returned to Zaragoza, only to be killed upon his arrival due to his betrayal of the town. Zaragoza itself would try numerous times to succeed from the Umayyads, mostly without success, however. This northern region, the northern marches, would remain one of the most unstable areas for the new emirate, with towns every now and then declaring independence, and the ever-present, ever-growing threat from the Catholic kings to the north. In total, it took Al-Rahman 20 years to secure his hold over southern Iberia, and much more to stabilize the northern border. But still, he did. Yet, he did rely heavily on local governors and factions to maintain control over the peninsula. And worse yet, a good chunk of them just paid lip service to the man, and acted independent throughout a lot of his reign and his successors. Now, let's fast forward to the 900s. Chaos has sort of been a staple of this peninsula. Uprisings would start in Cordoba, which are brutally suppressed, and the exiled prince, Al-Rahman, is long dead. Now we have the Emir, Al-Rahman III. This man rose to power after the death of his grandfather, apparently without opposition. His realm was not very stable, to say the least. There were rebels in the Algarve. Governors either refused to obey or were in active revolt, and whichever ones were loyal were weak, and they lacked the strength to adequately defend themselves. So, in essence, he lacked any sort of power outside of his own capital. The emirate was close to collapse. Worse yet, for the young emir, the Catholic kingdoms were growing stronger and bigger by the day. Lisbon was sacked in 798, Girona was occupied by the Franks in 785, and the Vikings had arrived, ready to pillage and plunder up and down the entire peninsula. It was chaos, and it is to this situation of near collapse that our Rahman III pops up. He was made emir in the year of 1912, and he had lots of work to do. First, converted Christian rebels in his country, who he managed to put down with a mercenary army, and a much bigger threat, that of a man named Umar Hafsun, a converted Christian who led a bandit army in the peninsula. He had been a huge problem for the previous rulers, but when our current emir rose to power, he was still a very big problem. He controlled several dozen castles all throughout the countryside, and he, for decades, had now fought a rebellion against the emirs in Cordoba. However, after a shift in tactics from the capital, of basically putting continuous pressure on Umar, he started losing territory, and during the reign of Al-Rahman III, he was finally defeated. Well, it's more accurate to say that he died, and his loose coalition of Christians, Muslims, and bandits couldn't figure out who's in charge. It's honestly typical for this age, I'd say. His next big trouble, however, were Berber rebels. I have no idea how to say that word with an English pronunciation. Moving on, in the Algarve and the Alentejo region. Now, as I said, most of the governors in the area were either in open revolt or they were too weak to defend themselves, such as the governor of Evra, for example. These rebels stayed active for a good while, and the local governors, they basically started ruling themselves. So, despite the new emir's many attempts at increasing the power of the emirate, it was still pretty damn weak. Although, at least nominally, it's a situation that is about to change. We are the most worthy to fulfill our right, and the most entitled to complete our good fortune, and to put on the clothing granted by the nobility of God, because of the favor which He has shown us, and the renown which He has given us, and the power to which He has raised us, because of what He has enabled us to acquire, and because of what He has made easy for us and for our state to achieve. He has made our name and the greatness of our power celebrated everywhere, and He has made the hopes of the world depend on us, and made their errands turn again to us in their rejoicing at good news being about our days. And praise be to God, possessed of grace and kindness, for the grace which He has shown us, most worthy of superiority. For this superiority which He has granted us, we have decided that the Dawah should be to us as commander of the faithful, and that letters emanating from us or coming to us should be in the same manner. Everyone who calls himself by this name, apart from ourselves, is arrogating it to himself, trespassing upon it, and is branded as something which He has no right. We know that if we were to continue with our neglect, this duty which is owed to us in this manner, then we should be forfeiting our right in erecting our power, which is certain. So order the Khatib in your place to pronounce, using, and address your communications to us accordingly, if God will. Despite his still precarious position in the peninsula, Al-Rahman saw fit to declare himself as the Caliph, thus ending the Emirate's troubled existence and beginning a new caliphate. Oh, and by the way, the Abbasid Caliphate was still around, and there was another caliph in modern-day Tunisia, which is known as the Fatimids, who they weren't just in modern day Tunisia, they basically ruled North Africa. And they directly opposed the new Umayyad Caliphate in Iberia. Honestly, this man has some balls on him. Real titanium balls. His family had almost entirely bounced back from the incredible defeat they took almost 200 years ago. However, there was still trouble. The kingdom of Lyon, for example, had used the chaos of the situation to capture several border areas and wreak a lot of havoc in the Umayyad territories. So, the now Caliph, or Emperor Al-Rahman, sent an army north to deal with these naysayers. And this army, it got pim-slapped to oblivion at the Battle of San Esteban de Gormaz. I think this event shows us one good aspect about the Caliph that a lot of previous rulers lacked: his capacity to adapt to several factors. The army that he sent didn't work, because again, he must have thought that the Christians were nothing but a troublesome pest. Centuries ago, the Catholic kingdoms were indeed just that, annoying pests who occasionally send some raids south, but that age is long gone. Even though the Muslim territories are now an empire, they are much weaker than they were as an emirate, and even weaker than they were during the Umayyad Caliphate in Damascus. At this point, they basically have to share the peninsula with the Christian kings. So in turn, the Iberian Caliph, he sent an even bigger army north, and this one saw much more success. He recaptured Osma and San Esteban de Gormaz. He defeated the Navarra, the king of Navarra, in battle, and the king of Lyon at Val de Junquera. And he also captured dozens of castles all along the border. He pushed Leonie's army from Toledo and even got the counts of Barcelona and the queen of Navarra to acknowledge his superiority over him. And in some parts of the border, he even pushed the king of Lyon all the way back to Burgos. It was honestly a complete reversal of the Caliphate's fortunes. However, all that's good for them can't really last now, can it? In 1939, at the Battle of Simancas, Leonie's forces met Al-Rahman's army in open battle. The battle took several days of fighting, and apparently 2 days to start? According to historians, there was a solar eclipse, and none of the soldiers on either side had ever seen something like that before, so everyone was terrified. But anyways, it was clear at this point that Al-Rahman wanted to end the Leonese kingdom's existence. They were causing too much trouble for him. So, with a quarter of the Catholic realms in Iberia capitulated and swearing fealty to him, he called a jihad and he marched to Lyon. Thus, we got the Battle of Simancas. And with him was the governor of Zaragoza, and also of the governor of the province of Huesca, the latter of which is whose actions would be pivotal for the battle. 2 days after the eclipse had come and gone, the battle began near the river of Pisuerga, and it lasts for several days. The tide starts turning in the Catholic kingdom's favor when it becomes clear that the governor of Huesca is standing down and doesn't join the fight. Bit by bit, Al-Rahman's army begins to rout, and the battle is lost. The Caliph himself nearly dies during the engagement, and soon after, it becomes clear that the governor of Huesca, who is called Muhammad al-Tawil, is standing down, and he's not fighting. Muhammad, for nearly his entire life, has been seeking a sort of independent foreign policy, fighting both the Catholic kingdoms and the emirs to the south. So, seeing a resurgent Cordoba winning battles, he found the perfect opportunity to dict them over. Al-Rahman's army is routed, and Muhammad is branded a traitor, hunted down, and crucified in the center of Cordoba. But this man's actions had huge repercussions for the new caliphate. With this battle, the initiative is back on the side of Rion. However, it would take a good while for the northern kings to seize the initiative, as they would fall into a brutal civil war, and the kingdom of Rion, the biggest Catholic power in the region at the time, also fell into a brutal civil war that would see Castile, another kingdom, finally enter the Iberian stage. This was around the year of 940, by the way. So, the Caliph returns home to lick his wounds. He would never again personally lead military campaigns, and he most likely had some amount of fear over going back on the offensive. So, while the northern kingdoms were descending into civil war, Al-Rahman took advantage of it, picking different sides in these wars in exchange for territory that the northern kings had seized before. He, for example, helped the overthrow of a Galician king in exchange for their territory. And despite not really engaging in conflict like he did at the beginning of the war against Rion, he still held massive sway over the peninsula. He even got the Count of Barcelona to recognize his superiority over him. Now, let's be clear, he didn't spend his whole time, the entire time doing political manipulation and warring. No, this man was a humanist, and he had a love for the arts, particularly a love for architecture. He ordered a renovation of the mosque in Cordoba, ordered the construction of a great palace some miles outside of Cordoba. This palace is now known as the Medina Azahara. It's a pretty big place. In fact, when I looked it up, it's described as a palace city. This place was built to resemble the Umayyad old palace back in Damascus, as a way of sort of connecting his rule with that of his ancestors, and as a way to legitimize himself. He also expanded Cordoba's library, in turn making the city the most important intellectual center in Western Europe at the time. He also treated the Jews and Christians in his empire fairly, and his fleet became one of the most dangerous in Europe at the time, with raiders and travelers going up to Provence and south of France, and I think I heard of some people going up to Brittany and making a colony there. I may be wrong, I'm not sure. If I remember, I'll put it in editing somewhere around here, like I usually do here. So, despite the chaos of his early years and the seemingly unending troubles of the past, at least briefly, there was prosperity in the peninsula, and the power had returned to the hands of the Caliph. He was also keenly aware of how quickly the Caliphate's power could fall, so he kept a tight leash on his family, preventing any naysayers from moving against him, to the point that in 949 he executed his own son for conspiring against him. His power, however, was also recognized abroad in the rest of Europe. The king of Germany, Otto I, and even the Byzantine emperor sent emissaries to engage in talks with him. Oh, and this part is fun. Al-Rahman III, he's a icon, and he was kind of a Greek. Right, I'll explain to you. The Caliph had both male and female harems in Cordoba, and apparently he spent so much time with them that people started to criticize him and saying he was a hedonist or something. He also apparently had a relationship with a 13-year-old boy. So, a Greek man in love with a fanboy. Over a millennium later, they're all dust now, so who cares? Al-Rahman is the man who stopped the Muslim collapse and gained a lot of power for himself in his new caliphate. He managed to re-establish Cordoba as the undisputed capital of Iberia, and he even managed to lead his empire into becoming a regional European power. In the next chapter of this series, I want to, yes, continue the timeline that we're building here, but I also want to see how the caliphate collapsed and how that played directly into the Catholic Kingdom's hands. And yet, we can already start to guess how. When I was in school, I remember that I was taught that Portugal and Spain, that we won the reconquista, well, because of us. Go team. But more I keep looking, the more I see that it was a series of ineffective rulers and chaotic border regions that allowed the Asturians to march slowly forward, and something that I will get into later in later videos is that the reconquista was not a real reconquest. Not at all. It was much more complicated. It was a conflict like any other that we felt the need to justify. And what's the justification? Just look at what we call it.